Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. Link, which bypasses the Apple upcharge, is right here in the description. It's $2.99 per month. That's all you should pay. And you get access to 11 different channels, including our stages. Today, actually, by the time that this airs, we'll have Adele and Matt on there doing a very early 2025 draft stage show. We'll have other stage shows throughout the week. That's content you are not going to be able to get on the podcast feed. So make sure you check it out. Link right here in the description. This episode is specially sponsored by our friends over at Underdog. Join more than 5 million happy players and $2 billion. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money. There's also a lot more on the app, so make sure you check it out. As I have, use the code 5 when you sign up. Again, you know that code, FIVE. You get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. So we think Jimmy Butler is going to have another 30-plus point game. Might want to play him over. Of course, everything is on there, including NFL. So check it out. Again, it's Underdog. Use the code 5. Get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Must be at least 18 or 19 in Alabama or Nebraska, 19 in Colorado for some games, 21 in Massachusetts or Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and 5 Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow me at Brady Hawk 305. Make sure to check out the post-game episode that I did with Greg and Major. Actually, now 2-0 in the last 2 games that Major's been on the post-game show. So perhaps the jinx has been lifted. Miami Heat go into another off day at 7-7. They play Milwaukee in the next game, trying to win this NBA Cup thing. I am not going to try to explain the NBA Cup. I do not care enough. I do not really understand this concept. I don't really care to understand it. It's just, to me, I don't know. It's. Does anybody remember that the Lakers won the NBA Cup last year? To me, it's just a trip to Vegas for some of them, which most of them don't even really want. So anyway, but they do play Milwaukee, and then they have Toronto coming up, and we've talked about this upcoming schedule that they got to get some of these games now because it's going to get a lot more difficult going forward. They got a stretch of 6 games where they play 5 of these so-called elite teams in the league. It's very reminiscent of what we saw early in the season where we said you got to get those wins early because then they're going on that road trip. And of course they went 2-4 on the road trip. But today we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler, who is now coming off back-to-back 30-point games. There were special circumstances involved with both. One of them, he was coming back from an injury, so he had some time off. And then because of that sort of screwed up schedule thing that the Heat had, he had 5 days off and came back with 30 points. Actually he ended up with 34. Okay, 33-34. And, of course, made the game-tying basket at the end. Very, very good play design by Erik Spoelstra. Duncan made a great pass. Jimmy finished. Probably should have finished the game in regulation because he did get fouled. They didn't call the foul. Jimmy had 17 shot attempts in the last game, 16 free throw attempts. So that's pretty damn good shot distribution. And now Brady, he is up on the season. He's played 10 games. Of course, the Heat have played at this stage 14, but he's played 10 games. And his averages are coming back up to what we've come to expect. He's now shooting 52% from the floor. That would actually be the second highest in his Heat tenure. Of course, this is season 6 for Jimmy with the Heat, so that would be his second highest in his Heat tenure. As a 2-point shooter, because his 3-point shooting is way down from last year, not just in terms of percentage, but also in number of attempts. He's down from 2.4 attempts to 1.4, and his percentage is down from 41 to 21. But his 2-point percentage is up now to 56.2%, essentially tied with his best mark, which was 2 seasons ago. He's now averaging 5.7 rebounds per game, which is pretty consistent with the last 3 years. He's averaging 5 assists per game, which is the same as last year. He's averaging 1.4 steals, essentially the same as last year. 1.7 turnovers, same as last year. And he's averaging 19.2 points, which would be his lowest since his first year in Miami when he averaged 19.9, but again, has been creeping up of late. The one thing that is down for Jimmy is the free throw percentage. He's actually averaging more attempts than last year, but he's shooting 76.5%, which would be the lowest mark of his career, which is kind of weird that's happening now. But what we wanted to talk about today was the way he's been used the past few games. And Brady, the Heat did not have anybody in the game against in the last game that you would classify as a point guard. Like Terry Rozier is sort of a borderline point guard. Josh Richardson isn't even close to a borderline point guard, but he's played the position in the past. And neither of them played. Rozier, because he was still out with a foot injury, and Jay Rich was a DNP-CD. And yet the Heat only had 9 turnovers, and they had a ton of assists, and they scored enough points to win a game in overtime. What do you make of the ball handling distribution, and how do you think this impacts Jimmy?
Yeah, so I don't think this is a real point guard thing. I just think all indications point toward when Jimmy Butler has the ball in his hands more, when Jimmy Butler is aggressive, and when he's just looking for his own shot and creating off the dribble, this team is a better offense. They're a better basketball team in general. Just like some regular normal stats from this season, when he's scoring 25 or more this season, they're 3-1. When he's had 6 or more assists this season, they're 3-1. When he's got to the free throw line 8 or more times this season, they're 5-1. All indications are pointing toward when he's kind of the main aggressor on this team, it just leads to W's. It just leads to a better version of this team. And it just puts all these guys in the right spots. They can run the lineup that they did yesterday. Like the fact they closed for that long with Pella and Burks, most of it was the fact that they were just the 2 guys that were playing the best among the role players. But it was the fact that they fit in with that they were altering Tyler and Jimmy with these kind of 3-man actions. You're watching Burks in one corner, Pella in the other, and they were just knocking down shots when they get the kick. And if they weren't, they were cutting back door. They were defending at a decent level, and that is all you need when Jimmy is playing at that level. And you still have, even though Tyler, the stats weren't loud yesterday. It was 8 for 25. It kind of points to kind of a down game. I thought he played pretty well. Like he had some pretty big shots down the stretch, and he didn't seem out of control at any part of the game. It was just the 3-point shot really wasn't falling. But as for Jimmy, it feels like when he's able to create and when he puts that type of pressure on a defense early in the game, like the fact that he's at 12 free throw attempts at halftime. Like when he puts that pressure on a defense, it opens up everything in the second half. And that's why the third quarter looks so much better. It's because it was a totally different offense. It wasn't the same thing as usually it's like the first half offense. It's a lot of Tyler. Second half offense comes out there and it's like you're hoping that 3-point shots fall. And if that doesn't happen, then the third quarter gets stagnant. This is the case where if he sets the tone with the free throw attempts and slowing the game down, the third quarter becomes, okay, we don't want to foul Jimmy. We're going to play a little bit, more straight up. We don't want to do that. Now they're shading more help. And now it's these other guys getting going and Duncan hitting his shot, Alec Burks hitting shots. Like the different guys can get going. It's just pretty clear. It's just a more efficient version of their offense when Jimmy's playing like that. And I think what we're seeing now as well, Ethan, is there's certain combinations that Spo is getting to that I think are going to stick. And one of them is like the Kevin Love, Jimmy Butler thing needs to stay. Like we talked about the Duncan Bam thing and how they needed to do that to make this make sense. I'm at that point with Love and Jimmy. Like those 2 guys, I asked Jimmy about it last night where he just kept saying, like, we don't even have to talk to each other. We just put a little head nod. We throw at each other and we know exactly what the other one's thinking. And you need that type of chemistry to win these type of games. Like that one pass where he off the free throw make where Jimmy just straight line darts and Kevin's watching him and throws it down. Like you need that to kind of bring, energy shifts in a game. And it just feels like they have to lean into that.
Well, it feels like old man game at like the JCC. Like it's just like 2 guys who know each other. Obviously, Kevin Love and Jimmy Butler are a little more accomplished than Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Goldberg at the JCC. But still, there's a similarity there in the sense that it's just like, okay, they just sort of know how to play. Like, and that's the thing. And I think that's why there's that connection between the 2 of them. And there really has never been that connection between Bam and Jimmy on the offensive end, like where it's just like clicks, where they sort of, again, they've had success defensively. It's worked. They've gotten to 3 conference finals, but you don't feel that kind of innate thing between the 2 of them. And yet what's funny is you feel it between Bam and Duncan. So it's not because one guy is incapable of it. It's just certain players just click, and we've seen that with them. Now, I think a couple of things on this. One is I think the fact that Jimmy's been able to pull his numbers back up to sort of the levels we've expected over the years is good because you know that he still has it in him. Okay. The question for me, and then we'll get into his actual role and the ball handling and all that. The question for me is when he does have the back-to-backs, when he does have 2 games in 3 nights, and we're coming up on a back-to-back, and we'll see if he plays in both of them. You and I were talking about this before the show. But what the numbers look like then. He played against a team in Dallas that has typically given him trouble. He only averaged 13 against them last year in the 2 games. They didn't have Luka, but that doesn't affect the defense. So the fact that Jimmy was able to score the way he was last night when you had Lively playing as actively as he was is a good thing. The other thing I've noticed about the stats here, it's kind of interesting. The one number that pops is Jimmy's offensive rebound number this year would be a career high. 2.9 per game. He's never averaged more than 2.2. He's typically between, over the course of his career, 1.3 and 1.8. It feels to me like a lot of that is he can't necessarily elevate over length in the first try, but when he's relentless, I can remember there's at least 3 or 4 sequences this year where it's like he's gotten 2 offensive rebounds in one sequence where he just keeps going. And that's the thing. And that's as we talk about Jimmy as he ages, okay? He's not going to be able to do certain things on the first attempt as easily, but he has to keep going at it. And what I liked in this last game was he just kept going at it. Like that's why we titled, the episode, Butler's relentlessness, pushes back Dallas, because that's really what it was. It's just he didn't stop. Like, and I think that gives his teammates confidence. And then we'll get into kind of Hero and Butler and all the rest. But Tyler's the more stylish player at this point, and offensively, the skilled player and all. Jimmy just has to be the bulldozer. That's really where we're at. And you saw it last night too, that he was better when he had contact and leaning into that contact. So, but my question, Brady, on that before we get into role and all that, can he sustain that like physically without getting hurt over the course of the season? Because that's what worries me.
That's the big question. I mean, when we used to talk about contract year Jimmy and like what it would look like, I don't know if that can continue over an 82-game season. That exact thing, like where if he's just bulldozing into people into the chest and falling on the floor, like I think he could play at this level over an entire season. Like I don't see a reason why. But that version of it's a little tough. And I think when you mentioned the offensive rebounding numbers, other than him just tipping it back himself and being relentless, like they've utilized him more. Where let's say in this lineup, they have Haywood in the corner and Jimmy's kind of the baseline roamer, where you see second opportunities where he'll just play off a miss from another guy, where he's just playing under the rim a lot more than he did in previous seasons. He's just roaming down there a lot more, and he's not the guy that has to worry about getting back. That's for the guards to get back in defensive transition. Jimmy can attack the offensive glass as much as he wants. And you hit on the other part that I think is really important to mention. Other than the fact about the days off and him doing this in 2 consecutive games, doing it against this team matters to me because he's struggled against this team in the past. These type of teams he struggled against. We've talked about the one thing that kind of stunts Jimmy a little bit is the positional size when they could just throw those type of guys at him and say, okay, here's a 6'10 guy, here's a 6'9 guy that we're going to just throw on and off you, and you have to figure it out. And the thing was, he just out the gate knew they were going to do that and just put his shoulder into their chest every single time and got to the line. And then you saw a little bit more of the flair in the second half when they were not fouling, and then he worked the spin move into the floater. He worked more jump stop layups. It just felt like it was a total masterclass in terms of just his basketball IQ of just reading the game as it went. And like I said, I just think that matters more to me against that specific team. But the thing is about his role that I think is interesting. Tyler's still going to have the ball in his hands a ton. When Terry comes back, I think it's going to be the interesting part. And I think that's why the bench thing is just kind of pointing more and more toward this, because I think they can play off each other. But as much as they try to get Terry into some type of a groove and working off the bench, I think it probably fits a little more. I just think if you bring Terry back into the mix here, and let's say they put Terry in for Duncan, you're just kind of restarting from scratch here again. It's like you're almost telling Jimmy, okay, figure it out again, and we're going to start over and try to find your offensive role and play it like below the glass still, but you're going to have to pick your spots on the ball. And I just don't think you do that to a guy that's in this type of a rhythm. It just feels like they have to kind of flow into things. And as much as after the game when Jimmy's saying, I hate to say it, but Duncan made a great pass, and he kind of goes at Duncan still at this point of his career. They play like he needs that. He needs those type of players on the floor with him. I watch it time and time again how comfortable he feels when he has Tyler and Duncan on the weak side. It's the reason why he plays well with Love. He needs shooting around him. He needs those type of guys that are worried about pulling off of the guys on the weak side. It just makes sense right now. So not to go back to the starting lineup conversation, but I just like a lot of these lineups that they're working right now at this stage when he's just out there on the floor with shooting. It just works.
Yeah, and we don't know what Haywood's status is going to be. He left the game sick, so there may be a starting lineup change just because of that, and maybe Jovic goes back in for him potentially. We saw Jovic only play 6 minutes in the last game. Jaquez played only 19. That's another podcast topic. What's happening with the two of them right now? Because right now Pelle Larsson's playing both of them, as is Alec Burks, to be honest, and that's why I think we came out of that game, talked a lot about this on the postgame show. Burks and Larsson need to play. I think what we saw, Jay Rich not playing in a game that Rozier didn't play either, I think gives you an indication that he's going to be further back on the bench now. But on the other side of this, I want to get into like how different this is from what we expected, because the whole thing was Jimmy kind of was hinting at taking more threes and leaning more into the shot. You saw him do that last year, and he's right back to Bulldozer Jimmy. But again, can he be Bulldozer Jimmy game after game after game and stay healthy enough? And can he do it even if on say two days, even only has 1 day off? Will his legs be fresh enough to do that? I don't think there's any way they should put Rozier back in the starting lineup, though. I think that clutters this entire thing up. You could see where the role is for Rozier in yesterday's game, and I think they just need to lean into that. Just bring him back off the bench, let him get acclimated, let him play 20, 25 minutes, and if he's better, then he plays more, okay? And there will be closing opportunities. We saw last night, nobody expected Larsson and Burks to be closing a game in the first quarter of the season, and we saw that, and they did it in an overtime game. And Spo did mix in Love and Duncan during that as well, but he played them primarily. And again, it worked. They were two of their best plus-minus players, and Larsson played great. And Burks has been good every time he's been on the floor this year, pretty much. All right, before we get anywhere else, though, we do want to tell you where to take your car if you got problems with your wheels. It's U-Brake Wheel Fix, based in North Miami. They've been with us since almost the very beginning here. Mark and his team will take really good care of you. They got a new deal there, 5.5% off your entire order if you mention 5 reasons. Not only do they fix the wheels for you, but they can spruce them up. They can do the powder coating. They can get all kinds of colors on them. They do refinishing, wheel polishing. They do everything at U-Brake Wheel Fix. Make sure wheels look nice for the holidays, or just, again, make sure that they don't look ridiculous on the road, and certainly you don't want problems with them. So check them out, ubrakewheelfix.com. You can find them on Instagram at that same handle, U-Brake Wheel Fix. Again, mention us down there. You get 5.5% off your entire order. All right. Does the shooting surprise you with Jimmy? Because has he just not been able to get into a rhythm? Because he was a better 3-point shooter. Last year he shot 41 I'm not saying we expected him to replicate that, but 41.4% on 2.4 attempts, which was his highest attempts in Miami. Okay, his highest previously was 19-20. He averaged 2.1. This year he's down at 1.4. He's only making 0.3 attempts per. He's only made 3. Basically, made 3 out of 14 so far. And the other thing is that's weird is the free throw shooting. You want him to get to the line. Everybody's like, well, the Heat's free throw percentage is down from last year from 82 to 78. And almost that entire decline is Jimmy's decline because he is their highest volume free throw shooter. He's averaging 8 free throw attempts per game. Bam, of course, is second at around 5. Well, is there something wrong with his shot right now? Is it just not have confidence in it?
I don't know if I'd say I honestly think it's more of a case of him just not settling this year, where I felt like as much as we highlight the high percentage last year, a lot of the portion of that season we were saying, okay, he's settling for the 3-point shot. Whereas a lot of times we felt like he could get to the rim more, he can get to the line more, he could do more of that stuff. And now it's on the flip side where he's not settling, but he's just not hitting it as much on his lower attempts. And I just don't think you can have both things. I think you can have one or the other. And at this stage, with kind of the level you want him to play at, especially when you're without guys like Terry, I'd rather him be the guy that's not settling and playing his game and playing inside the arc and doing that stuff. Now, the free throw shooting, I'm not sure about that. That almost feels like a team-wide thing. I don't know if it's just a Jimmy thing. They just haven't made a ton of free throws, and it feels like they have a lot of decent free throw shooters on this team. It's not like they have like low percentage free throw shooters that are just missing. Like these are just guys that are just missing free throws. And almost feel like it's rubbing off to the next guy. It almost feels like it's like they're just feeding off each other because they're overthinking it now, I guess, a little bit. But I all this stuff, like every year with Jimmy, there's always something we point at of a percentage being down and we overharp on it, and then it never ends up mattering. It was the finishing in the past. It was mid-range. It's like it's always something different, and now it feels like it's either the free throw or the 3-point percentage this year. And I'm just at a point now where I'm sick of over harping on things with Jimmy at this stage. It's like this stuff's going to end up reaching its level. Like it's going to end up figuring itself out. It feels like a little bit. I'm more worried about seeing his explosiveness, his aggressiveness, his ability to do things against these type of teams. And the fact that we saw that, like that's the ideal part to me. And then the other thing on the flip side that we talked about before is finding chemistry lineups, finding ways that we could put him in this lineup and he's ultra aggressive with this group. But then if we put Terry, Tyler, and Bam, and he's kind of standoffish and he plays that baseline, like that's the stuff you have to figure out at this stage of the season. And then you play off that. The percentage stuff, it's too early, I think, to overdo that. So the key to I think the main thing that I take away from what we've been talking about is the fact when you said, is this sustainable? And that's going to be my main question. I mean, there's certain games coming. Like they have a back-to-back tomorrow and Wednesday. It's an in-season tournament. I know the in-season tournament. They're not overthinking this, but it's an in-season tournament game against Milwaukee. Pretty big game. And then you head to Charlotte, who's a team he usually plays really well against. Like he plays really well against that team. There's a good matchup for him. I'm curious to see how he treats this back-to-back. I'm curious to see if he plays as on the ball in both games, or if it's kind of a case where he's still going to play both games and he's going to play his game, but it's just I'm going to take a back seat and let Jaime get more on-ball reps or Tyler get on-ball reps. I'm curious to see how he treats that. But I think it's good to see that he could still play at this level. It's good for him to know that he could still play at this level. I don't think he ever doubted it, but it's good to see that for a lot of people that he could still turn it on like this and just take over a game, because that's completely what he did last night.
Well, and Charlotte's got a couple guys that can get you too. I mean, LaMelo, and has been really hot of late, although he's typically struggled against the Heat. One thing that Spo is clearly doing, though, is he's not forcing Jimmy to take on the most important defensive assignment. Even when Hayward's not in there last night, he used Larson on Kyrie for the most part. There were a couple possessions, and then Butler would pass him off in the zone. But other than that, he wasn't on Kyrie all that often. You mentioned this thing about the free throw shooting. Before we go, I just want to speak to it. So they're now at 76.6%. This matters because it's a team that struggles to score at times. So they got to make their free throws. And they were at 81.8% last year. So they've dropped 5 percentage points. But Tyler's at 86.5 on reasonable volume. Rozier, low attempts, but 88.5%. Bam is down a bit. We see this happen with him. He's at 70.8%. Jovic at 80% on low attempts. Highsmith, Duncan don't get to the line very often. Pretty much nobody else. Larson's only made 58%, but on 12 attempts. So it really is. The decline is really Jimmy. It's going 65 of 85. I mean, he's missed 20, and I don't know what that is. It's tired legs. I'm not sure. It's just lack of concentration. He needs to be over 80 because, again, you want him to get to the line as often as possible, and that 1 or 2 points, like we had a lot of people on playback yesterday who were complaining, like, well, if they just made the free throws, no, well, if Jimmy went better than 11 of 16, the game is over. And I do think that it's interesting to me he didn't get some of the calls. Like people talk about, well, he got 16 free throws, whatever. He could have had 22 free throws, I think, if the officials had given him a little bit more of a liberal whistle there. I mean, any thoughts on again, I guess you mentioned it. I understand him not shooting as many threes. I get it. I don't understand the free throw decline, because if he's going to play this style, that's where the points are going to come from for them.
So I'll say this, my reasoning of why I don't think it's the jumper, because we could point out certain numbers. Then there's the fact of less than 10 feet from the basket, he's jumped from 56 to 58%. So that number's actually gone up this season. The bigger number to me, he was at 39% on mid-range pull-ups. And I've said before, like they've cut the guards out of mid-ranges, but Jimmy and Bam are kind of still allowed to push into that range. He was at 39% last year, and this year he is at 46. So 39 to 46% on these mid-range pull-ups. So you're seeing like he still has it in certain areas. And I feel like that matches the eye test, because I've seen him take a lot of these kind of fadeaway turnarounds or free throw line jump kind of pull-ups. And it's looked fine. So I don't really think it's the jumper. And the threes, I just feel like I don't even remember him taking many threes. Like I remember the one where Tyler swung it to him a few games ago in the corner. He kind of hit a big three. I remember a lot of them were early in the season where he was forcing them up, like late in clock threes. Like they're not like in rhythm, in offense threes. It just really feels to me the 3-point part is he's just kind of leaning away from it a little bit. And he's playing this. And maybe it'll be a case like last year. I mean, last year, the 3-point shooting started rising later in the season. So maybe it's like early in the season when he has his legs, so play into this, and then maybe he'll lead into the threes later in the season. But you're right. I mean, the free throw stuff, has to get better because you're not going to be getting 17 free throw attempts every game. So if you're only getting 8 to 10, let's say, on the high side, I mean, you have to take advantage of that. You cannot leave any points on the board there, especially when you don't want to be putting your body on the line time and time again on these back-to-backs and hitting the floor. So you're right. I just don't know if it's a mechanical thing. I just think it's just in his head missing some free throws. And I know the percentages don't show it, but 10 free throw attempt misses as a team, and it's happened multiple times this season. It just feels like they're going to lose a game this season because of it. And we're going to talk about it, a little bit louder.
Yeah, they could have lost last night as a result of it. I just think it's as funny as we wrap here that all the conversations, well, they need a point guard, they need a point guard, they need a point guard. And they have a 9-turnover game without a point guard. And it feels like even with Spoelstra that the lean in to having his best players handle the ball most often is where this always goes. And it's just, and when Spo sat down with us when they first acquired Jimmy, he said he kind of envisioned a LeBron light role for him. He didn't use that term, but the way he described it. And that's what this is. The ball wasn't in Rio's hands. The ball was in Dwayne and LeBron's hands to make plays for everybody. And now it's really in their hands, in Jimmy's hands. And I think you come out of these 10 games, let's just rate it before we go here. Only playing 10 out of 14 is not ideal. He's on a pace. What is that? That's 70% of the games. So that would put him on a pace for about 60 games, roughly 58, to 62 games. Again, ankle injury, that's going to happen. He's probably going to sprain an ankle again this year. It happens with him. If we were to say he plays 60 games, let's say, again, survives the trade deadline, we don't have to get into the extension talk right now, but he plays 60 games, and these are his numbers. Is this good enough?
I think so. I don't think you need the 35-point games every night. I just think you need it sporadically. I think you need it when the team needs it. Like when there's certain guys out, or if Tyler's 8 for 25 in a game and you step up and you drop 35, like that's what's going to equal wins. You don't have to. There's been games before where they've won in this season where he has 12 or 14. And I think that's fine too. I think it's all about picking his spots. I don't think he has to be the main scorer. I think they position this offense for that to be Tyler. I think they positioned it for him to kind of get more threes up, play on the ball. And if he doesn't have it, Jimmy can kind of step up in that way. And ideally, it's still to come. I think there's a larger role for Bam here coming up. I still feel like that's the way to really maximize this group, is that when both of them don't really have it, kind of have that extra step, Bam has to kind of be the initiator and kind of score in those ISO situations like he did last year. But they haven't really got to a point where they really needed it in a game. But in terms of rating it, I would take this version of Jimmy Butler, and maybe it's a little bit of recency bias of what we've seen in the last 2 games. But they can win games like this. They can win. I don't expect them to win many offensive battles. The defense is kind of the part. Like, we didn't talk about this enough, but I know you were talking the other day about Jimmy and his defensive numbers. But seeing some of the stuff he was doing last night, like the chase down block on Grimes, some of the jumping these passing lanes, even when he's not guarding Kyrie one-on-one, just the stuff he was bringing defensively and leading into transition, where he's able to kind of, Kevin Love finding him on the break, that type of stuff. That matters to me. And I think if you're getting that version of Jimmy defensively, I'll take that over, going from 10 points in one game to 30 the next game. I'll take that type of inconsistency if you're getting that level of effort. So 100%. We talked about last year where he didn't show up in the big games against the big teams, against the good teams. And you're just seeing a little bit of an uptick where he's providing a little more energy against the team like Philly or this game against Dallas. Like the fact that he has a little extra energy and he's talking to the crowd and he's playing into it, and you need that on this team. He cannot be that mellow Jimmy because they feed off it when he brings that energy.
Yeah, and he was good in the Sacramento second half too. So there have been some games against some better teams that he has shown up for. I give him a B so far. think that's
That's
I
what
don't
would've said.
yeah, I think he's about a B minus. Again, the B minus maybe for missing the 4 games, but he's always going to miss time. It's just how do you maximize him when he plays, and then is he ready for the end of the regular season? The good thing is though that Tyler has been able to emerge with Jimmy still playing at a certain level. That matters, but you're right. The third guy's got to come along for the ride here. I didn't think Bam played all that well. I thought Lively outplayed him, even though the numbers were pretty good. It's going to need more from him. And we talked about corner threes and all that. We'll do another Bam episode, I'm sure, soon. But they need all 3 of them clicking. That's the chance that they have. And then they kind of figure out who the other 2 rotating pieces are going to be on a given night. All right, thanks to Brady. Thanks to our sponsors, You Break, We'll Fix. Underdog, use the code 5, FIVE. I'll be at the game with Brady and Alex on Tuesday night, so catch our coverage there. Greg will have the post-game pod and no major, so they got a chance to win. Have a good one, everyone.